Number 1.
So, back in February, there was a man that looked homeless walking up and down my street. My partner and I were outside working in the yard, so we paid a little attention but didn't think anything of it. The next day, he showed back up. He walked up my driveway and camped on my porch. When we asked what he was doing, he said he was going to fix this place up real nice and get himself a dog and some flowers in the front. We asked him to leave, to which he answered, "No, I live here now. I have the papers giving me permission to live here." He then handed us a change of address form from the State Housing Authority, where he changed his mailing address to mine. This was not a permission to live at my home, but letting them know to send his mail there. I should point out at this point that I don't know this guy. I've never met this man. Neither has my partner. We asked him to leave again or we would call the police, after getting a picture of the form. I spent all day on the phone with the state housing agency trying to figure out what the hell was going on, but they had no answers. A week goes by and we don't hear from the man. Then I walk out to check my mail, and he's waiting at the mailbox. He opens it every few minutes, but the mail hasn't come yet. He tells me to leave him alone, and this doesn't concern me. He doesn't want to talk to me. He's just waiting for his check, and then he's going to go home. To which he then pointed at my house. I remind him that he doesn't live there and start dialing the cops. He takes off, swearing at me the whole way. The cops ask me if he's on the property currently, and when I say no, they say to call back when he is, and they will come out. I also put a hold on my mail that day, because I don't know if he was stealing it. A few weeks go by and strange things are happening around the outside of my house. My trash cans get taken to the street and brought back. My weeds are pulled. My lawn furniture is rearranged, but I don't see the guy anywhere. The cops offer to add more patrols, but unless they catch him on the property, they won't do anything. They start to act like I'm going crazy because I'm calling them every day. At one point, the officer that came out after I found threatening notes taped to the front door asked me if I can prove that this person doesn't live here, because he said,
"This sounds like a domestic dispute. We don't handle those."
I start to feel like I'm going crazy. Finally, after about a month of this, my husband and I come home from a late dinner out with my friends. We walk into the house and smell shampoo. Then we hear the shower. Then we hear the sounds of someone talking. We turn around and leave. We get in the car and park it at the end of the street to call the cops and watch the front door. The cops come. They have megaphones and keep telling the man to come out of the house with his hands up. No response, so they charge the front door and drag him out of the shower. There is a struggle and he starts to fight back. He can't believe he's being treated like this in his own home. How dare they? We can hear him yelling from a vantage point at the end of the street. He won't come willingly, so the cops taser him in my front hallway. That was his final complaint. They grab my husband's shoes from next to the door and tell him to put them on, and they march him out to the waiting police car. After filling out all of the reports, we were allowed to go back into the house. He had smashed out all of our windows, so there was glass everywhere. He ate the leftover chicken parm in the fridge. In my bedroom, my bed is messed up. He'd slept in my bed. My clothing is all over the floor because he emptied my dresser to put his things in. We had just put our dog down a few months before, and the urn was on the table. He broke it open and spread the ashes all over my bedroom and bathroom, which might be why he was taking a shower. He used an entire $90 bottle of skin serum and almost the whole bottle of shampoo, but he had folded all of my towels that he'd taken into the bathroom with him nicely and hung them on the rack. Thank God he didn't hurt my cat. He's currently in jail on 3 charges: breaking and entering, assaulting an officer, where he fought the cops, and destruction of property. His trial is next week. I've been in touch with the DA and the arresting officer. Both of them have spoken with him. He's pissed he's in jail and keeps telling them to let him out because no one is watching his house and he doesn't want it to get broken into. I'm still getting his mail. Number 2. This story is very detailed, and maybe all the backstory isn't entirely necessary, but it's the only way that I can really tell the story properly enough for you all to understand, or for me to tell it easily. I do sincerely apologize for the length if it's too long. In 2010, I gave birth to my middle child. He was born with some serious health issues and ended up being hospitalized for several weeks when he was only a couple of weeks old. Because he was so small, there wasn't a whole lot the doctors could do to help improve his condition other than IVs, breathing machines, and around-the-clock supervision. It was such a hard time, and my husband and I were a wreck. The doctors told us it was really just a wait-and-see type scenario, and we should just spend as much time as possible with him and hope for the best. So that's what we did. My husband was a store manager at a well-known supercenter at the time, and used his vacation time to be at the hospital with us. By the time his vacation ended, our son was still in the hospital, somewhat improving, but it was still really touch and go, and my husband felt like he needed to be there with us. So, he asked for some more time off, and it was granted. He was told to just call and let them know when he could return, and they put him back on the schedule. As soon as our son was well enough to come home, my husband called his job to let them know that he was able to return to work. Turns out, because of his attendance, they decided to demote him to another position. He'd be making less money, but not a significant amount, and we could understand where his employer was coming from, because they were generous with the time off they allowed him, and that our son's health issues weren't their problems. He's an employee, and he's supposed to be there. Whatever, we could still survive on his new salary. No big deal. Within 2 weeks of returning to work, my husband got injured at work. In order to continue working, his employer said that he had to go to physical therapy before he could return. So, he was out of work again, so soon after returning. After a few weeks of physical therapy, he was cleared to return to work, but his employer started drastically cutting his hours. And after all the expenses we incurred with our son's health issues and my husband being out of work, our savings was almost entirely gone, and we were not going to be able to keep up with the expenses much longer. At that time, my son had a lot of issues that required me to be able to be home to give him treatment for, and I couldn't return to work. So my husband started looking for another job with full-time hours so we could make ends meet. He quickly found a new job, making significantly less money, but still more than what he was making with his current employer's cut hours. So he took it and intended to keep looking for another job as well. We're steadily falling behind on bills and rent, and trying to put food on the table for our 2 children, and also provide everything a new baby needs, and we then realized that we were not going to be able to continue living where we were living. We explained this to our extremely kind landlord, and are allowed out of our lease. We began looking for a cheaper place with a short lease, so that when things pick back up, we can move into a better place. And eventually we found a place that was incredibly cheap and ended up moving in. It was in a bad part of town, a part of Dallas that's well known for being a bad part of town. And if you're from Dallas, Texas, then you probably know exactly where I'm talking about. However, I'm homeschooling my daughter, and our son is still small, so I'm not worried about them going to school in this area, and I figure it's only a few months. And when my husband is at work, the kids will stay inside. We were in a desperate situation, and I was trying to be positive, and we would make do with what we had until we could do better. This place is a complete shithole. It used to be a house, but is now a duplex, and most of the other houses on our street are abandoned and have been vandalized, including both houses on each side of our home, and the street looks generally scary. However, our next door neighbors are extremely kind, and it put me at ease having them next to us, because if anything were to go wrong, they'd be right there. A couple of weeks into being there, I start to relax. It's a shitty area, and not many people live on our street, but the few people that I met were really cordial, and I didn't get any bad vibes from them. Mostly older people, and a few families, and seemingly no shady characters, much to my surprise. Because of those factors, I began to feel more comfortable with the area, and think maybe I'm just judging it so harshly because of how run down it is, and because it's a notoriously bad town. So I begin to think that just because it's run down doesn't mean everyone that lives here has bad intentions. So instead of sitting in my backyard to smoke cigarettes, I started sitting on my front porch. That was a huge mistake. As I'm sitting there smoking my cigarette, people watching, I see a man walk down the street that I've never seen before, which isn't unusual in this type of neighborhood, so I remain vigilant, but also don't think much of it until my dog, who was just a small, elderly, well-behaved wiener dog, started losing her fucking mind when she noticed him. This is not normal behavior for her. She never barked at anyone, and when she started barking, the guy stops dead in his tracks and stares directly at me and my dog, and starts pounding on his chest and throwing his arms up in the air like, "Come at me, bro." I was freaked out, and as I was about to turn around and go inside with my dog, something overcame her and she sprinted right off my porch and directly towards the nut job in the street. When he saw that she meant fucking business, he started to walk away, quickly. Still, my dog kept following him and barking her tiny little ass off. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to get my dog, but I didn't want to walk up to this man either. This went on for several seconds, and the man then turned around and started yelling at my dog, threatening her and making stomping motions like he was about to stomp on her head. I was scared, and I wanted to protect my dog, so I ran out to the street and scooped her up and ran inside. I heard the man yelling behind me as I was running inside, saying that he was sorry. I went in, locked my doors, and tried to calm down and not let my kids see that I was shaken up. A few hours go by, and I wanted another cigarette, but I didn't want to go back out front to smoke, so I was just going to sit on my back porch, when I realized that I'd forgotten my cigarette and lighter out front. I cautiously looked out into the street from the window to make sure that the creep from earlier was good and gone before stepping out. But the porch is large and long, and from the window you can't see the bench that sits between my door and my neighbor's door. When I step out, I'm absolutely stunned to see that the man from earlier is sitting on the porch, on the bench between our doors. I admittedly kind of froze up, and before I could say or do anything, he said he wanted to apologize for earlier, but he didn't want to scare me by knocking on my door. Okay, yeah, so just give me a fucking heart attack by sitting on my porch and waiting for me to find you sitting there hours later. And how did he know that I'd even come back out anyway? He explains that he's just afraid of dogs, and he wasn't going to hurt my dog. He was just hoping to scare her off. I'm almost lost for words, and I kind of just nod my head and wait for him to leave. He doesn't leave. He still just fucking sits there, staring at me. This continued for a minute before my daughter broke the silence by coming to the door and saying that my pot of water is boiling over. This is when I really started panicking, because now he knows that I have kids, and I'm obviously home alone, no car in the driveway, and at this time my phone was out of service. It was a hard time, and I just couldn't afford my phone bill. So I'm terrified about everything that could happen. Neighbors aren't home, I don't have the car, no way of calling anyone. I felt sick to my stomach. I tell my daughter to go sit down and that I'm coming. I tell the man that I have to leave and go, and I book it into the house faster than I've ever moved in my life. I keep looking out of the blinds for the man to leave. After about 5 minutes, he walks away. 10 minutes later, There is a knock at my window. Yes, my window. I peek out, and it's the man. I reach over to the fireplace, grab my fire poker just in case, and I very, very slightly crack the window. He asks if dinner is done and if he can have some food. I tell him that I don't have enough and I'm sorry. He goes on to explain that he's homeless and he hasn't eaten in days and he's starving. I know it's really stupid, but I have a soft spot for helping the homeless, and I hate seeing people go hungry. So I told him that if he could go and stand across the street at the park while I put a plate of food on the porch for him, that I would give him something to eat and drink. He agreed and stayed across the street while I placed the food on the porch. After he ate, he left. When my husband got home, he found the used dishes on our porch. I told him what it was about and he scolded me. Rightfully so. After that, days went by and I didn't see the man again. I just assumed that he was just a passerby, down on his luck, that was genuinely afraid of tiny dogs, or wasn't well socialized and meant no harm. But I was wrong. Shocking, I know. And eventually, I started seeing him walk down the street again. Occasionally he'd see me through the window, smile and wave. That went on without incident for about 2 weeks off and on. Then, one day, my dog starts flying off the handle, flipping her shit again. And I assume it's because my neighbor's rather large pit bull had gotten into our side of the backyard. Not the first time, but the dog is a sweetheart. So unless my dog is bothered by her, I don't complain about her being there. And I went to let my neighbor know, so he could come get her. When I stepped out, my neighbor's car is gone, and the man is again sitting on the bench, but doesn't even seem to realize I'm there. He's just sitting there, slapping himself in the face, drooling and scratching his face and neck. He's rocking back and forth and talking to himself, saying all types of shit that I can't understand, and he doesn't seem to hear my dog barking or notice anything that's going on around him. I'm thoroughly fucking afraid of what I'm seeing right now. I don't say a word, and I quietly back up and go back inside to figure out how to get him off of my fucking porch. Then, I remember he's scared of dogs, and maybe if he sees my neighbor's giant pit bull, he'll snap the fuck out of whatever trance he's in and move along. My next move is undoubtedly stupid, but I'm worried about this man sitting on my porch while my kids are home and my husband and neighbors are gone, so I want his ass to go the hell away. So I grab my dog's leash, go to my backyard, and put the leash on my neighbor's dog. I tell my daughter to get our dog, go to the back bedroom, lock the door, and sit in there and watch TV while her brother is napping. And she does. I then gather all my freaking courage and walk this massive pit bull around to my front porch, and just stand there, waiting for this lunatic to snap out of it and realize that I have a huge dog out here, and hope he's gonna run off. Cookie, my neighbor's dog, starts barking upon seeing him, and finally he slowly looks up and smiles the absolutely creepiest smile that I've ever seen, and says, "Hey there, I didn't know you had 2 dogs. He said this normally, in a normal tone, as if he hadn't been acting like some kind of psycho talking to himself and doing all sorts of other odd shit. So I said, "Yes, but she really doesn't like people she doesn't know, and sometimes she bites." He got a terrified look on his face and actually jumped over the railing rather than walking past the dog and myself. When my husband came home, Creeper was again walking down the street and stopped to talk to my husband. I see the interaction in the driveway and I step out to see what's going on, and apparently he's asking my husband to bum a cigarette. My husband honestly didn't have any on him and was out, so we told him no, we didn't have any. Also, this is the first time that my husband had seen this man, so he had no idea who this man was at this time. The man said, "Okay, fine. Can I have some water?" He gave my husband the same homeless spiel that he'd given me. My husband, who also has a lot of compassion for the homeless, gave him a few dollars and told me to go in and fill up a jug of water and give it to him, which I did. We handed him the water and walked to the porch. When we get to the steps, we hear the man cussing under his breath and talking to himself, and turn around to see him pouring out the water that we had just given him, calling us bitches and motherfuckers, and we just kind of look at each other like, what is going on? He then calmly turns around, throws the empty jug of water on the ground, and proceeds to pull a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and throw it at us. What the hell? A mere minute ago, he was just asking for a cigarette. He was mad that we didn't have any, and turns out he'd already had a pack. My husband told him to get the fuck out of our driveway and not come back ever again. I told my husband that he was the guy that had been coming around, and I thought that he was on drugs and had some serious mental issues. After this, my husband immediately calls to my phone to be turned on and starts having his dad stay with the kids and myself whilst he was at work. Once Crazy sees that my father-in-law is there at all times now, we start seeing less of him. Actually, I only see him once after this, and that was in the back of a police car at a nearby gas station. More on that in a minute. After not seeing him for a while and thinking that he got the hint, we come out one morning to find that there is a poopy fucking toilet paper all over our lawn and porch. We immediately know it was him. We ask all the neighbors if they saw anything, and they claim that they haven't. So we don't bother calling the police because we know they're not going to do anything about it if there's no proof. We didn't even know his name. Plus, the cops in the area are known to not be so great anyhow, so it feels like a dead end. Now, after the toilet paper incident, there's 2 more shift-related instances where poop was smeared all over our windshield, and then another time on our front door, along with, you guessed it, poopy toilet paper strewn everywhere. A week or so after the poop incident, we were pulling up to a gas station and see him in handcuffs on the curb in front of the store, but I was so happy to see him being put in a police car. After that, we ended up moving to Austin and getting as far as we could from that situation. Things are great now. My husband has an amazing job. My children are doing wonderful, and I've never lived anywhere like that place again. I don't know whatever came of him, but I pray that he got some help.